So in this video I want to talk about how we can get from chapter 4 in Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, to chapter 5. How do we transition from having just saved 10 towns from the Charter and Dragon to getting to Auril's Abode, and how do we make the transition between those chapters more interesting than what's given in the book? First off, my name is J.A. Vellynne with Eventyr Games, the Adamantine best-selling publisher of DM's resources for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, including the adventure Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden, which is what we'll be talking about today. The inspiration for this video actually came from Touch, which is one of our legend patrons over at patreon.com/eventyr, who asked if we could do a video about the transitions between the various chapters in the book. So yeah, thank you Todd for a great idea, and of course thank you to all our other patrons over at patreon.com/eventyr for all of the support. I previously talked about how we can use chapter 2 when we go from the various chapters in the middle of the adventure, but in this video I want to focus in particular about how we get from chapter 4, which is where we get Vellynne's quest, at least if we follow the book, and to chapter 5, Auril's Abode. Just to lay out the situation as it's described in the book, the characters have just saved 10 towns from the Charter and Dragon and the Duergar Tread, or hopefully saved 10 towns, and they've met up with the wizard Vellynne, who immediately dumps a lot of exposition upon them, telling them about the city of Ithrin, the Codicil of White, and Auril's Abode, the Isle of Solstice. So in essence, the characters are giving all the information they need, and then Vellynne basically also tells them how they can get to the Isle of Solstice, either by traveling with a whale, or going to Revel's End and securing a ship, or seeking out the Goliaths who can get them there on Griffinback. Now, I'm not the only one who've noted that this isn't altogether very interesting just to have Vellynne tell the characters everything and then send them on their way. So what I suggest instead is that we transition a bit more smoothly from chapter 4 to 5, and we also include more locations from chapter 2, Icewind Dale. The way that we've done this in our games is to provide some options for the characters. So instead of just telling the characters exactly where they need to go and what they need to get and how they get there, Vellynne says that they need this Codicil of White, but she has no idea where it is. She does have some ideas about how to find out, however. She knows that her rival Nas Lantomir stole her Professor Orb back in Loscam, and that Nas was going to Icewind Dale on ship, but so far it seems that the wizard hasn't arrived, which is weird because he should have arrived even before Vellynne. So that's one option. The characters can go out and see if they can find Nas Lantomir or find out what happened to her ship. The second option is that Vellynne has heard about something called the Jarl Mood, this spiritual place where giant spirits can answer questions. And this is of course the location Jarl Mood in the book, and something that the characters may also want to inquire about, figure out where this is located. There's a third option that's not in the book. That's the adventure we've written, A Heart of Cold, which you can get somewhere in the link below. The adventure revolves around a small hamlet called Goldenheart, where there is an elven priestess who's been turned into a banshee by the betrayal or the deception of a frost druid. There's a lot to the adventure. The basic gist of it is that here is also a place where the characters can learn more about what's going on, and you can insert whatever information you want. In this case, where Auril's Abode, the Isle of Solstice, is located and how the characters can get there. So to line them up, that's the 3 options that I would give the players. You don't have to give them all 3, you can do 2, you could even do just one of them, but these 3 options give the characters a path to figuring out more. If they decide to try and find out more about Nas Lantomir, that would probably mean heading into 10 towns, asking around about ships or wizards, and eventually, especially if they ask around the northern part of 10 towns, they should learn that a ship has shipwrecked off the coast of the Sea of Moving Ice. This is of course the Dark Duchess, which is also described in the book. So traveling to the Dark Duchess, you can run that location exactly as it's written, except that you place Nas Lantomir's corpse and the orb and her ghost there instead of on the Isle of Solstice. This is a much smoother way, I think, to include Nas Lantomir, and also makes this hunt for the orb more rewarding. When the characters get their hands on the orb, of course, it can tell them where the Isle of Solstice is, so the characters can go there following the quest almost exactly as it's written. As for the Jarl Mood, that's also well described in the book. If the characters go into town asking about the Jarl Mood, asking about giant spirits, they may eventually be led to Yuselm, this druid who is masquerading as a ranger or guide who can take the characters to Jarlmut. The Frost Druid is of course going to betray the characters, turn against them, and just a note for the DM here, Jarlmut is a difficult location already, so with a druid betrayal it can get even more difficult. If you want to hear just a bit about reducing difficulty, the last video I did on chapter 2, Icewind Dale, an overview, has some pointers for reducing the difficulty here. In any event, going to Jarlmut, the characters can learn from the giant spirits if they ask them that the Isle of Solstice is of course in the Sea of Moving Ice and also roughly where it's located. Then of course there's a third option, which is going to Goldenheart and either helping the druid destroy the banshee or releasing the banshee from its undead existence, and from either of these two get some pointers on how to get to the Isle of Solstice. What you can also do of course is that you can have one of these locations lead to the other two if you want to include more content from chapter 2. So that could be Vellynne suggesting that the characters go look for the Professor Orb as the first step, and once the characters have located the Professor Orb, the orb gives them two options. There's the Jarlmut and there's also a priestess living in this town. You can flip that around either way you want, so if the characters go to Jarlmut first, they'll be pointed to the Dark Duchess or Goldenheart and so on. So yeah, that's the first step of the transition, and the next step of course is getting to the Isle of Solstice. This you can run almost as it's described in the book. There's three options available. There's Angerjug's Bell, there's Revel's End, and there's of course the Goliaths who can fly them there on Griffinback. I will probably stick to Revel's End or Angerjug's Bell as these are located in the area. If you think the encounters there are a bit boring, you can include an encounter with Auril or whoever is riding on the back of the rock on the way to the island, as I've also suggested in our previous video on chapter 5, Auril's Abode. I like to summarize these things in my head and on paper when I'm planning them out. So to give you a step-by-step of what happened in our game, here's how it panned out. So the characters had just defeated the Charlton and Dragon, half of 10 towns was saved, the other half not as much, and the characters finally got the quest from Vellynne. Vellynne only told them that she knew that Ithrin was somewhere here, and she knew that a Codicil of White, a book, was used or was to be used to open the door to the place. She doesn't even know where the door to Ithrin is or how they can get there. That's something the characters will have to figure out later. But before they can use that information for anything, they'll have to find the Codicil of White. So in our game, Vellynne said that her rival had stolen her Professor Orb and she had no idea where she was, but she also knew that there was a priestess living in 10 towns who could maybe help them in a small hamlet of Goldenheart. So the characters asking around didn't immediately find out about the ship, so instead they went to Goldenheart, they resolved the quest there, spoke with the priestess after defeating the Frost Druid that was trying to deceive them. The Banshee was quite helpful. Her spiritual connection with the spiritual world allowed her to sense that Naslantumir's ghost was by the coast where her ship had shipwrecked, and she also knew about the Jarlmut and the spirits there. So she pointed the characters in both directions, letting them know that these two options would probably know where the Codicil of White were hidden. The characters opted for Jarlmut, went there, and of course got the location of Isle of Solstice and the Codicil of White from the giants. Heading on from there, they went back to 10 towns, restocked on provisions and healed back up while asking questions about how one would travel into the Sea of Moving Ice. They got the two options here. There's ships from Revel's End, and there's of course also the awakened sperm whale, which has been known to take on passengers. Finding the sperm whale the more entertaining option, they went there. We skipped the encounter with the bandits as they were far too high level for that anyway, but included a run-in with Auril and her rock on the way to the Isle of Solstice. So that's how we transitioned from chapter 4 to chapter 5, and that took roughly 5 or 6 sessions, but we could of course have drawn it out more if we wanted to, or made it shorter by skipping some of the steps. So yeah, that's my take on how you can transition from chapter 4 to chapter 5 in Icewind Dale, Rime, and Frostmaiden. If you'd like to see more stuff like this, I could cover how we transition from chapter 5 to chapter 6 in the next video, so let me know down in the comments below if that's something you'd like to see. Beyond that, there's only the standard YouTube things to say, so that's please like and subscribe if you want to support the channel. Go on to patreon.com/eventyr. We put out cool content for 5th edition every week. And yeah, that's it for me for this one. I hope that I'll see you in the next video.